As some or most of you have heard at this point, the EU has voted on Article 13. It is now moving on to the next step towards becoming law. To anyone who understands tech and the internet, this is a very scary proposition if it and Article 11 do become law. It will mean the end of the internet as we know it globally. The effects of Article 11 and 13 will be felt around the world. They will not just impact European Union nations due to how the current environment for social media and video content hosting are with the internet big three. The only way for them to actually comply with Articles 11 and 13 is by enforcing these articles globally. There is no other practical way for them to comply. They have no other choice but to, in order to do so. To think otherwise is just being naive. With the proliferation of technologies like virtual private networks and even Tor, with how they allow for users to surf the internet from outside their region or country, any attempts to enact measures necessary to enforce Articles 11 and 13 without doing so globally will not accomplish much of anything at all, in all honesty. Those who actually wrote the articles had to have known this would be the case, especially with how they are written. It is clearly intentional too, as far as I can see. We are talking about people who are, for the most part, globalists if you look at the EU's government. Globalism and the legacy media outlets that push it, along with everything else they want going along with it part and parcel, are facing their demise and do not want to go out quietly, never mind in a dignified manner. They have decided to fight what is almost an inevitable event happening and are doing so tooth and nail. They witnessed Brexit in Europe. Even with control of the legacy media, the globalist EU lost against nationalism and populism. Two things, when combined, that are nearly unbeatable as history has shown. They thought they could control the flow of information and through it the minds of the masses. The problem is, they couldn't do that in regards to the internet. The alternative media as a fragmented group made up of individuals was able to reach far more people than they ever could, even going back to when they were the only game in town. This has been especially true when it comes to the younger generations. As a result, the people saw right through their doom and gloom, Chicken Little, sky is falling, Great Britain will never be great on its own without the EU, or ever again, end of the world, 40 years of darkness predictions. I mean, when you get on TV, in newspapers, and online, and are making the UK leaving the EU sound like this, it really isn't hard for the masses to do that.
A disaster of biblical proportion.
What do you mean, biblical?
What he means is Old Testament, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It also isn't hard for the alternative media to prove how full of shit you truly are, and with that gaining credibility and viewership. It was almost as if the globalists and their propagandists and the legacy media, with how low IQ they see and treat their viewers and readers, were actually encouraging them to seek out alternative outlets during Brexit. Then they witnessed their fellow globalist, one who is an elite among them, one a lot of them are afraid to cross, fearing a double tap to the head or heart suicide, lose to a nationalist populist candidate in the 2016 US presidential election. When that happened, they saw that nationalism as a populist movement was not a fluke and was only growing stronger. This has been more than confirmed since, because of these types of movements growing in nations throughout Europe. The globalists are seeing that they are losing their grip on the world. They see their players in political office losing their seats at the table or never being able to get one in the first place when it comes to governments around the world. They are seeing that people are not buying into the propaganda and what they are being told to believe by the legacy media. They are losing the information war and know it. The globalists knew it years ago too. Here is a clip of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, a globalist herself, talking about how the United States, the tip of the spear culturally and in regards to the legacy media globally, losing the information war. Even though she specifically mentions RT and Al Jazeera at the time she is testifying before Congress, they truly were not a threat to controlling narratives, being legacy media-styled outlets themselves. Internet-based alternative media, that was the real threat, but she couldn't say that because it's made up of average people, as in Americans, and that definitely wouldn't have looked good for her or the Obama administration.
We are engaged in an information war. You know, during the Cold War, we did a great job in getting America's message out. After the Berlin Wall fell, we said, okay, fine, enough of that. You know, we've done it, we're done. And unfortunately, we are paying a big price for it. And our private media cannot fill that gap. In fact, our private media, particularly cultural programming, often works at counter purposes to what we truly are as Americans and what our values are. I remember having an Afghan general tell me that the only thing he thought about Americans is that all the men wrestled and the women walked around in bikinis, because the only TV he ever saw was Baywatch and Worldwide Wrestling. So we are in an information war, and we are losing that war. I'll be very blunt in my assessment. Al Jazeera is winning. The Chinese have opened up a global English language and multi-language television network. The Russians have opened up an English language network. I've seen it in a few countries, and it's quite instructive.
Whether people want to admit it or not, the United States is the dominant nation globally when it comes to its media and culture with their proliferation beyond its national borders. Almost everyone in the world knows Hollywood and the US movie industry. Ask people outside the UK, France, mainland China, or anywhere else what those nations' equivalents are to Hollywood, and almost no one will be able to tell you what they are. On top of this, pretty much everyone outside the US also knows more than a few of the different broadcast and cable networks along with the content they produce, including news programming. As part of this, CNN is known around the world. Mind you, these days it's for being fake news though. This phenomenon of the US being the dominant media culture is the result of, in large part, the Cold War. The proliferation of the United States militarily throughout the West and even Asia in fighting the Cold War has led to the dominance of American culture and media globally. This dominance was harnessed as a weapon and tool in the fight against communism, one that has now been turned against all of us for not allowing ourselves to be clockwork oranged. As a tool, it was used to shape the views of Americans, Europeans, and others in the free world towards aligning with the stance and actions being taken in fighting the Soviet and communist threat. In regards to behind the Iron Curtain, it was used to not only shape views, it was also used as a way to undermine the existing ones that people held in regards to their nations and the political system of communism. Plain and simple, in large part, that dominance was used to propagandize the world. Once the Soviet Union and Iron Curtain fell, as you saw Hillary Clinton say testifying before Congress, we, meaning the propaganda pushers, saw no need to stay vigilant. They thought they had won the information war at that point and controlled the flow of it, which for the time being they had and did control its flow. The problem is, they did not take into account technological innovation that would reignite the information war, never mind change the landscape of it and the battlefields it is fought on. To these people, they never thought the internet would become a place where they would have to once again wage war to control information. For the longest time, they were able to convince the majority of people that you couldn't believe what you read, listened to, or viewed on the internet, and it worked. Once they realized that it wasn't anymore, especially with their propaganda-friendly legacy media outlets on the internet by that point too, it was too late for them really to do anything about it. Besides, they never really thought that they would lose the upper hand and advantage they had when it came to controlling information, even with the internet. They figured that beyond their outlets, the internet would be a place where people would be posting cat videos, videos of guys getting hit in the nuts, talk about stupid shit, things like that. They did not think it would become a place where people would actually talk about subjects of importance, such as politics, or take into their own hands the presentation of information contrary to the legacy media narratives. They never saw it as a place where someone like myself on a 4-year-old laptop could create content and compete with them doing something like that. Neither do the Silicon Valley globalist elites who have attended the same Bilderberg meetings as those in politics and media. The fact that YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter have come out against Articles 11 and 13, as far as I see it and am concerned, it is nothing more than a dog and pony show for the normie masses. It is just lip service, kind of like how this is lip service.
Jack, a little help.
Teal'c, stop.
The reason why I say they are paying lip service is because they are already mass censoring people using the same exact technologies and criteria the EU wants them to put in place. This is when they are supposedly there just for the protection of copyright. They are already able to take videos and images, go through them using algorithms looking for naughty words or wrongthink, and in the process also have the computers running them for copyrighted materials on top of this. Just ask anyone who creates Star Trek related content on YouTube about how their copyright algorithms work if you doubt me. All of their fair use content has either been removed or has Paramount taking part of, if not all, of their ad revenue from their videos, which shouldn't even be happening under fair use. That being said, this is where I want to say I disagree with Sticks, Hex, and Hammer 666 in regards to the financial burden of Articles 11 and 13 being a motivator to the Censores 3 coming out against them. I respect his views, but this one I do not agree with. I think I have just made my case as to why too, when sites like YouTube already have algorithmic infrastructure in place to comply with it. For them, there is no additional cost. I also disagree with them on the note of putting pressure on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter in order to get them to put pressure on the EU. I do not honestly believe it will work. I wish I could say otherwise, I really do, but it won't. These are the same companies who just mass deplatformed and depersoned Alex Jones, while grandstanding for everyone to watch them do it. Then put on top of this, it was while using bullshit excuses that didn't line up across all the different platforms taking part in it. It is clear they are going to do what they are going to do regardless of the general public. In the case of Facebook and Twitter, being publicly traded companies, they have both seen their stock prices dropping as a result of how they treat their users, like with spying on them, collecting their personal data, censoring them, and the like. The same is true with their user and site activity numbers dropping as a result of these things. Yet none of it has any effect on how they are being run. Meaning, they clearly don't give two shits what stockholders or their users are trying to tell them as a result of their doing these things. Do you honestly think when they don't give two shits in regards to those things they are going to give one when it comes to what people have to say and trying to put pressure on them? Of course not. They could truly care less at this point. All the important people have made their millions, if not billions by now. If they were to implode Facebook, Twitter, and Alphabet tomorrow and trying to win the information war, it would not matter to them. They would still be going home to their mansions and their expensive cars at the end of the day. They know they will be fine. We are in an ideological war, besides an information one. To these people running the show in these Silicon Valley companies, profitability is no longer their top priority. It hasn't been since before the 2016 US presidential election. Back then it was a lot higher on the list though, probably close to second on it. But due to Trump derangement syndrome, nationalism, populism, and now an openly displayed distaste for cultural Marxism, PC culture, open borders, globalism, and the left's ideologies in general, making money has moved further and further down the list. With the midterm elections happening in about 2.5 months in the US, profits have slipped even further down on their list of priorities. Having a deadline like that looming, right now, all they really care about is not losing any more ground, trying to retake as much of it as they possibly can in both Congress and on the ideological battlefield, and making sure they keep it. When you face enemies like that, ones that are more than willing to destroy themselves in the name of ideology, as those in Silicon Valley are showing themselves to be with their companies, you let them do it. You just control the battlefields and let them expend all the resources they possibly can while you expend as little of yours in the process. The more they try to fight you, the more they weaken and expose themselves in doing so, making it easy to take them on and defeat them in the end. War, if you were to compare it to running a race, isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. Yet, those who are fighting on both sides of this ideological and information war want to treat it as if they are running the 100-yard dash. This is purely the result of being short-sighted, not seeing the bigger picture beyond their hands in front of their faces, and wanting to see immediate gains and results from their actions. No one is actually looking multiple steps ahead and planning accordingly. Which, for those of us who are going up against globalism, cultural Marxism, and the like, it is probably a good thing the other side is doing the same, having a far more vast pool of resources to mobilize than we do. We are fighting a war of attrition. The only way to win is to hold out longer than the other side can. Which is why, for example, YouTube creators have seen their sources of revenue attacked by individuals and groups that are part of the legacy media, or by organizations that are at least partially funded by globalists like George Soros. They know if you can't finance a war, you cannot wage one effectively. They also know the risk of losing your source or sources of income is a great incentive for some to not get involved in the fight as well. To a large extent, this is how the Imperial British Empire and King George tried to treat the colonists of the original 13 American colonies. This led to the colonists knowing full well they couldn't fight a war of attrition on the terms of the British to fight them on their own terms. One example of their doing this was not fighting battles according to European rules of war. Prior to the American Revolution, modern wars were generally fought under certain rules. Both sides met on an open field of battle, lined up facing each other, each side taking their shots at the other until ultimately one or both sides charged at each other and engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Officers, especially high-ranking ones, were off limits and not to be targeted in battle. To do so was considered to be barbaric and uncivilized. It was also uncivilized for these men, being of noble birth or at least a high social standing, to physically take part in the battles themselves. It was beneath their rank in society and put them at what they saw as unnecessary risk. So as a result, they were off to the side watching and directing the battlefield from a safe distance. This was part of the rules of war, rules that the American colonists did not recognize in fighting the British. They chose to fight by their own rules, and as a result, two new tactics of war were pioneered in the American Revolution. The first of these new tactics was guerrilla warfare. The colonists learned how to fight in this particular way from the American Indians. They showed them how to sneak up on their enemy silently and take them by surprise. They showed them how to create ambushes. The colonists learned how to use the environment around them to their advantage in fighting a superior enemy who is better armed and put it to good use. The second tactic that was introduced in the American Revolution, which is in part linked to the first, was the addition of the sniper to the battlefield. An innovation that was only made possible thanks to disruptive technologies coming onto the scene and being adopted. The first disruptive technology, whether you want to call it one or not, was guerrilla warfare. Without it, the concept of someone hiding a safe distance away, picking off enemy combatants wouldn't have crossed anyone's mind in the Continental Army. The second disruptive technology was the long rifle, also known as the Pennsylvania or Kentucky rifle. Long rifles in comparison to smoothbore muskets were a big leap in technological advancement. They allowed for someone to take a shot from a lot further away than what was capable with a musket. A large number of Appalachian mountain men were very adept with these rifles, honing their skills using them to hunt in order to put food on the table. These men became the core of the first American sniper units along with American Indians. Putting both of these things together while tossing the European rules of war out the window was one of those "your chocolate is in my peanut butter" moments of game-changing proportions. It allowed for the Americans to inflict far more impacting damage to the British than they could have otherwise. As the British expended massive resources mobilizing to fight on open battlefields with their generals and other high-ranking officers separated and off to the side, Continental Army snipers made easy work of them. In the process, not only were they taking out the men in charge, reducing the effectiveness of the British Army regulars and mercenaries, they were also dealing a major psychological blow to them on top of it. The introduction and use of snipers, resulting from disruptive technologies, went to showing the resolve of colonial Americans in trying to gain their freedom from under British rule. When it comes to the internet and freedom of speech, the same thing needs to happen in regards to disruptive technologies and their use in this war we are fighting. We also need to stop playing by their rules on top of this. We have to keep as part of our focus that we are fighting a war of attrition and need to take full advantage of any and all opportunities we have to change the game and make it so that they have to play by our rules. We have to turn our disadvantages into strengths and use them against them. This is where alt-tech comes into play, and it is why it is feared and demonized as it is. Alt-tech is taking existing disruptive technologies, usually from free and open source software, while creating new ones and combining them into new and innovative products for end users that are viable alternatives to the internet Big Three's offerings. Right now, at this moment, there are drop-in replacements for Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube that are ready for mass adoption, and they have been seeing steady, even explosive growth. I am on each of them, as are a lot of content creators you are at least familiar with, if not follow on Silicon Valley's platforms already. These alt-tech platforms are the modern equivalent to the long rifle and afford us a safe distance. What we need to do now is combine them with the modern internet equivalent of guerrilla warfare and stop playing by their rules. We need to start going on the offensive while doing so out of their reach, as the Continental Army snipers did with the British over 240 years ago. To do otherwise and stay on their platforms, the battlefields they control, is just asking for them to lob a band-hammered cannonball right at you and wipe you out of digital existence. If you are a content creator, make the move to transition to platforms like Minds, Gab, BitChute, Steemit, and DTube. Help them to become success stories in competing with Silicon Valley and help yourselves in the process. Your doing so increases the amount of content they have to offer people and provides your subscribers and followers other outlets to find you on. You will also be exposing new people to what you have to offer on top of this, allowing for your audience to expand even more. If you are a content consumer, for lack of a better term, consider making the transition as well. You will find people and content creators you didn't know were out there due to how the internet's big three manipulate their platforms and shadow ban users. These are people like you who have themselves decided to look beyond the cultivated feeds meant to socially engineer you into loving things like cultural Marxism and other ideologies of the left. You will also be increasing these sites' user bases, which will in turn incentivize more creators into transitioning to these platforms. On top of this, don't forget to encourage your friends and family to check out these sites and join them as well. Without content creators and consumers, these sites are our best chance to win both the information and ideology wars. They will not be able to weather the shitstorm we are finding ourselves heading into. The larger their user base grows, the bigger the threats they become to the globalist and legacy media establishment's control over the internet and flow of information. But in turn, it also becomes harder to remove them from the internet. This is because they become more and more mainstream with even the normies, and they cannot easily make a move against alt-tech sites without all eyes being on them. We get these platforms to that point, we can hold out indefinitely and against just about anyone in a war of attrition, which, as I have already said, is what we are fighting. I am not ready to give up and wave a white flag. Are you? Are you just going to roll over, accept defeat, and let them win because at this given moment, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are the dominant social media and video content hosting sites on the internet? Or are you going to fight in whatever way you can so that we can beat these companies, showing them that we are the ones who will be telling them how it is? It is your choice. If you choose to stand up against this globalist, cultural Marxist, anti-free speech tyranny of the internet big three, join alt-tech sites such as those I have mentioned already. If you are in Europe especially, go out and get yourself a VPN subscription. Don't try to be cheap and get a free one. Pay service VPNs are as little as $2 or $3 a month US. You can afford something like that in the name of personal security. Then, use it every single day, regardless of what you are doing on the internet. Because someday, with how things are going in the EU and internet at large, a VPN will be the only way to have access to an unsanitized version of it in different parts of the world. In closing, yes, there is still time to stop Articles 11 and 13 for becoming law. I haven't admitted defeat on this note yet. I am someone who hopes for the best but plans for the worst, as you should be too. Just look at how Articles 11 and 13, even with the public outcry from EU member nations and nations abroad, they passed through the latest round of voting on them. If MEPs ignoring the masses isn't a sign that we are looking at a future with link taxes, copyright filters, and their use to censor the alternative media, I don't know what is. When it comes to the internet big three, I think they are a lost cause. They have made it clear that making money isn't their top priority, when it is supposed to be, having to answer to their stockholders who expect it to be. The people who run these companies have already made their money off of them and could walk in tomorrow with 2 jerry cans of gasoline and burn them to the ground if they really wanted to, minus the criminal aspects of doing so. They never have to worry about a thing again financially. So there is no actual vested interest for them to give a damn whether or not these companies actually survive, never mind grow while increasing profitability. On top of this, the EU globalist elites who are behind Articles 11 and 13 just happen to operate in some of the same circles as the Silicon Valley globalist elites. For example, just look at how many of them have attended Bilderberg group meetings together in the past, or other similar groups for that matter. Then look at the political, business, and social circles that they move between, interacting with each other beyond those groups. As a result of this, they are on the inside, we are on the outside, and we're not even able to look in and catch a glimpse of what they're up to. We find out after the fact, or when they think it's safe and too late for us to do anything, they tell us what they are up to. This leaves us 2 choices as I see it. We can sit idly by and let ourselves get picked off one by one on the battlefields they have turned their platforms into while following their rules of war which they like to change as they go. Or we can fight back and go on the offensive using alt tech and the disruptive technologies they have combined and harnessed into viable platforms. The more of us who choose to stand up to them and fight, the better off we are, the stronger we become. The choice is yours. If you liked this video, depending on where you are watching it, please give it an upvote or thumbs up. If you want to know when new content of mine hits the internet, don't forget to subscribe to one or more of my social media or video accounts listed here. Also, with YouTube, don't forget to ring that bell. You can find all of my video content on both BitChute and YouTube. This may not be the case with other places I upload to, but I will try to minimize this happening. You are always welcome to interact with me at any of these sites on the list, so feel free to do so. If you have anything you want me to cover in a video, when it comes to news or current events, send it right along to me. I will try to do my best to cover it. As always, thank you for watching.